Hello, everyone. Dr. Case has asked me to record the lecture about the distinction between analysis and synthesis. And so that's what I'm going to do here. If I look to my right occasionally, it's because I'm having to use two screens to record and I'm double checking that everything's working correctly. So without further ado, analysis and synthesis. This is about part to whole reasoning. And by the end of this lecture, I hope it'll be clear what that means. Oh, there's problem number one. There we go. So what's the difference? Analysis looks at the individual components of a thing. It identifies main ideas even. So the individual components can be literal physical things if we're analyzing a machine or a product of some kind. Or if we're analyzing a work of research, then what we would be doing is looking at the main ideas, looking at the different ideas and prizing them apart. And it also evaluates the quality of the evidence used to support the ideas. Okay, so we might look at each individual piece of evidence and evaluate it to see which evidence has better warrant than others, because on the level of academic thinking, we have to evaluate the warrant of a piece of evidence. So is this piece of evidence sourced properly? Does it come from a source we can trust? Or is there something incorrect in the evidence? That's another possibility. So all of those things are analyzing. So you can analyze ideas, evidence, or objects. Synthesis creates a total picture of how all of those components are related. So the point at which we're doing synthesis, we're doing kind of big picture thinking. So we look at all the parts, we've talked about them in detail, almost everything we can think of to say about them. And then we step back and we say, well, what does all of this add up to when put together? So one of the things that will happen when you synthesize is that you will be expressing your understanding of a text. And this can be incorrect. So on the level of synthesis, we're no longer talking about trivial things, right? We're talking about big picture things. When it comes to big picture conversations, you can find a smart person on every side of every issue. So you're merely expressing your best understanding of this big picture issue or this text you're reading. And when you're expressing your best, it doesn't mean your truth and falsity don't matter. It just means that what matters most on this level, on the level of synthesis, which is this highest level of reasoning, is that you marshal the best possible, most warranted evidence for your interpretation, because there are better and worse interpretations, okay, and better and worse understandings. And then finally, your goal, of course, when you're synthesizing, is to tell your reader what all of these pieces add up to. So what does it all mean? So we're on the level of big meaning here. So analysis can, even really high level analysis, can be about trivial things. We can analyze a machine just to understand better how it works. So you can still be doing high level analysis and be in the realm of the trivial. When you're doing synthesis, you are no longer in the realm of the trivial. We're now talking about big picture issues. Okay. So here's a kind of agglomeration of responses from week one synthesis. So most everyone wrote something to this effect. So 3 students mentioned that integrity or moral character were the most important attributes of a servant leader, whereas 5 students listed empathy, humility, and compassion. So I've asked here, why is this already an analysis? And my guess is you can see it right off the bat. It's because we're talking about the different parts of a response. So we've all these pieces that people have put together. We have these particular people who have put them together, and then we have this category kind of that they all fit into. And I'll come back to that. So if you didn't catch all that, we'll come back to that more explicitly here in a second. But in a nutshell, analysis answers who, what, when, how, and which. Okay, why is more of a synthesis question. When you're asking why or trying to answer why, that's when you're in the realm of synthesis. Analysis is the who, what, when, how, which. Okay. So let's break it down. So you see on the side here, I've got the analysis that I had on a couple of screens back, and I've bolded the 3 analytical components. In other words, the 3 individual components that we can pull out of this response and actually look at independently of each other. In other words, analyze them. So what's being analyzed? We have a who. Okay, we have the 3 students. What category of thing is being analyzed? Well, the most important attributes of a servant leader. That's the category of thing that's being analyzed. And then we have a which. We have which things within that category are being talked about. We've got empathy, humility, and compassion. Okay, so a who, a what, and a which. So that's why this is an analysis. And you'll notice too, in this analysis, we haven't yet begun to say anything big picture about these parts. We've merely noted them, and we've noted them in some detail. I mean, it's a single sentence, but for a single sentence, we've given it some detail. So we're not merely just repeating what we're seeing. We're doing a bit of organizing on this level. Okay, so how do you move from analysis to a synthesis? This is a little bit tricky because it requires creativity, but we'll go into that here in a second. So again, you'll see we have this kind of amalgamated response. 3 students mentioned that integrity or moral character were the most important attributes of a servant leader, whereas 5 students listed empathy, humility, and compassion. So you got to keep in mind that a synthesis paints a picture of how the components are related. We haven't yet done that in this analysis. So we're going to want to paint a picture about how all of this is connected. It's also going to express our best understanding of a text. The text here is just the kind of collective responses of our classmates. We're treating that as a text. Okay. And then finally, it's going to tell our readers what all the pieces add up to. So we're going to make a judgment call about what all these pieces add up to. Okay, so in other words, in short, synthesis connects the dots. So specifically, these are one of 2 things you can do to synthesize analytical details. You can ask yourself whether you can describe an area of agreement or disagreement between the things being analyzed that isn't already spelled out explicitly in the analysis. So can I find points of agreement between these ideas? Can I find points of disagreement that aren't already being talked about, but that I happen to notice when I'm looking at this stuff? Or you can ask yourself if your analysis implies a concession or a condition concerning the things being analyzed that isn't already spelled out explicitly. Now that's going to sound nice and abstract, so I'll put some concrete examples to this here in a second. But a concession, of course, is just when you're conceding a point about something that might not be spelled out. And then, of course, a condition is a condition. So let's look at what these mean concretely. So here's an example. Let's back away from the student responses. We'll come back to them, but here's an example from a popular film. So we've got this analysis to the side, and it says something like the second of the Christopher Nolan Batman films, The Dark Knight, pits the hero as champion of justice against the Joker and agent of chaos. The theme of law versus anarchy, or order versus chaos, is reinforced both by pedantic dialogue about criminality and by the association of Batman with the imagery of law enforcement. So he uses stun guns, gas pellets, body armor, armored vehicles, surveillance equipment, I could say, etc. Joker, on the other hand, is clad in the imagery of improvisational comedy, madness, homelessness, and hopelessness. Okay, so I've laid out all of these details about the things we see in The Dark Knight that have to do with this theme of law versus anarchy, or order versus chaos, right? So I've even discussed the theme here, and yet I am not synthesizing yet. I'm just talking about the details that make up these themes that we see in the movie. But I haven't yet stepped back from all of it and asked a bigger picture question. That I would just call that high-level analysis, but not yet synthesis. Okay, so notes toward a synthesis. So areas of agreement and disagreement, you remember I said that was the first thing you can look for. So areas of agreement and disagreement are not only spelled out in the analysis, but they're so explicit to the film that there aren't any connections to make that haven't already been made by the filmmakers, right? Christopher Nolan, and I think his brother might have been the writer, they're making all these connections for us very, very carefully in the film. So there's not really areas of agreement or disagreement that they don't leave spelled out for us. I mean, if you watch the film carefully, you walk away understanding that this is what they were getting at, this law versus anarchy theme. So we can set that aside. We're not going to find areas of agreement or disagreement that aren't already clearly spelled out. But there is a sort of concession to make about these details, something we can concede about them, okay? And this is what it is. I've got it in bold and italics right here. The Joker is an agent of chaos, but that also makes him an agent of death. Okay, this means that Batman's fight is a fight against, in some sense, the inevitable. It's the fight against death. Well, if you step back, you can immediately ask yourself some really important questions about that. Why would you fight the inevitable? right? What's the moral vision that motivates that fight or that makes sense of it? And I don't mean for us, I mean for Batman. Within the context of the story, what's the moral vision that motivates his fight? Um, as far as I know, it's never been made explicit that Batman believes in a god or in greater meaning. I'm not a giant comic book reader, so maybe somebody's approached that, some writer has approached that at some point, but it's not spelled out in the film, certainly. So, what is the moral vision that makes sense of that fight? And what is Batman really fighting for, besides a quiet existence for the middle and upper classes? Right? I mean, is that really what all it boils down to? He just wants people to have a nice, quiet life and then, shuffle off this mortal coil. So those are the questions that would be pursued as a form of synthesizing the material. So now we're in the big picture stuff. And this is the realm where we have to start marshaling our evidence and trying to find the best warranted evidence to back up our whatever claim we're going to make about the film. Okay, so back to our our classroom examples. So from analysis to synthesis, you see the analysis, again, we've gone over this several times already on one side of the screen. My notes toward a synthesis say this. When we step back from these particular things listed, the who, the what, and the which, we can see that they're all of a type. That is, they're features of moral character, right? So that's what we can do when we step back. That's just like the first layer, very simple synthesis. We step back and go, I see an area of agreement between these things. And it's that they're all features of moral character, okay? And it hasn't been explicitly pointed out in the analysis, and so it's a good starting point for a synthesis. So I might take a swipe at a synthesis and say something like this. This is point number 2. Though they used a variety of terms to express the idea, most of the cohort agreed that a leader's moral character is more important than experience, strategic thinking, or organizing skills. I just threw out something seemingly random there at the end, and so let's explain what I did there. Okay, so again, we have the synthesis I just read to you on one side, and here's my notes. Here's what I did. So not only did I step back to discover an area of agreement between the analyzed items, but I also made sure to mention what wasn't being said by the cohort, and that's super important when you're doing synthesis. You're always looking for the unsaid, for those invisible parts of a problem that you can make visible, right? So always ask yourself what's not being said here. So here's what's not being said, namely that moral character mattered more than other leadership qualities that a reasonable person might have expected to see as alternative possibilities. So note that none of this was explicitly stated in the cohort's responses or in the analysis. I got to it by finding the area of agreement and then stepping back and asking, what else might I have expected to see here? So if all of that wasn't clear enough, I always like to throw in a visual aid. So here's a visual analogy. We'll do an analogy to Legos for analysis and synthesis. So classic Legos analyzed. You see the image of the classic Legos there in their box. I could tell you as I'm analyzing it, I could tell you all the information I could find on it. There's a whole lot more than this, but this is just an example. I could tell you it was begun in 1932 by Danish carpenters. I think their last names were Christensen, and they were father and son. They used just simple blocks or bricks, varied in size very little initially. And then the sculptures that you could create from these bricks were somewhat limited in form. So, and then I could go on and on. My gosh, Wikipedia could have given me 100 bullet points. But, you get the idea. We can analyze by digging deep into what we're looking at here. We've got these things in front of us, and here's what all I can say about them. Now, let's do a comparison by analyzing the Lego theme sets that occurred a couple decades later. So Lego theme sets, these are the more popular ones these days. So I could say of these theme sets that they have a greater variety in parts than classic Legos. You see all the different shapes and sizes and forms and everything else. I could also say they're more deterministic patterns than the classic, right? You can probably make more varied things with classic Legos than you can with theme sets, since the theme set pieces are designed to play very specific functions in the sculpture. And it arguably takes less imagination than the Lego classic, right? Because the things are kind of designed for you. So at the point right now, I'm just doing a comparative analysis. I have not yet, even though I'm looking at two different things, I haven't yet started asking any big picture ideas. So I'm still just on the level of analysis. Arguably takes less imagination, is tiptoeing toward synthesis, but is not there yet, because that's not really spelled out. We're still just in the realm of analysis. So let's see what we would do to move this into the realm of synthesis. Okay, so the point here is that comparison in and of itself is not synthesis unless the comparison brings a bigger picture into view and elicits questions about it. Okay, so here's my example of how I would synthesize this comparison of classic Legos and theme set Legos. So Lego thematic sets arose in the 1950s in America, just as our country was forming a distinct cultural identity in the wake of World War II and the advent of the Korean War. We sought to understand who we were and what we were becoming, and therefore we witnessed the popularity of Old West Lego theme sets, astronaut sets in the 1960s, suburban home sets, and the like. There were also kind of nostalgic sets that were like really adorable town squares. You've probably seen them. It's easy to dismiss these thematic sets as failing to require as much creativity from children during a period in which parents could commit less time to play, right? That's kind of the easy criticism. Parents got busier and busier in the 50s and 60s. They couldn't play as much with their kids. Well, here are these sets that kind of put themselves together for their kids. They don't have to spend as much time on them. That's the easy breezy criticism. However, to fail to see these Lego theme sets as cultural artifacts of a distinct moment in American history is to fail to grasp what, in fact, they actually were. So see, through my comparison, I managed to say something big picture by the end here. I say that these are not merely dumbed down play sets for children. These are important cultural artifacts that tell us something about who we were. You could actually do an historical analysis of Lego theme sets, right? So there I'm in the level of big picture, where I'm stepping back and I'm saying, here's what all of this might amount to, or one way to conceive of how what all of this amounts to. Okay. Hello everyone. I'm going to take a little break from the main lecture just to point out some student examples of previous syntheses. That way you can see the APA 7 formatting that we're looking for, and also I can kind of talk you through what works and what doesn't. These are from students from a previous cohort, so these are nobody in your cohort. But here's the first one. So they were asked a slightly different question. It was about how COVID was impacting them because this cohort was coming through right as COVID was breaking. So just be aware they were asked a slightly different question than you guys were. So here it says, many colleagues identified time management as a continued challenge in their personal and professional lives. Various classmates expressed COVID concerns as a continual challenge and problem both personally and professionally. And you see each time they're citing their classmates right here, they've got their names and the year, right? Because that roughly approximates how you would do this with APA 7, right? So we'd like you to try to start doing these with your next responses if you can. So various classmates expressed COVID concerns as a continual challenge and problem, both personally and professionally. Okay, so we have more of the classmates here in an in-text citation. You'll notice the period comes after the citation. I think most everyone knows that, but just going to point it out. Okay, and I highlight these next couple of sentences because this is where I see the student beginning to work toward a synthesis, or at least laying the groundwork for it. So far, it's analysis, right? They're talking about the things they're finding in their classmates' responses. So differences between school district leaders and those who are not focused on maintaining positive school culture. That wasn't exactly a complete sentence, but that's okay. And so he or she has their in-text citation. Should be a space there between the name and the year. There's not a space there, but there should be. At the same time, other school district leaders are concerned with continually balancing roles in their district. Differences can be identified in classmates who have school-age children at home compared to those who do not. Okay, so they're looking at differences. So I told you one of the things you can do is look for areas of agreement and disagreement that aren't spelled out explicitly in the analyses you're looking at. And I'd say that's what the student is trying to do here. So those who have school-age children at home stated a challenge of ensuring learning continues for their students during quarantine or distance education, and the added element of delivering children extracurricular activities. Okay, again, the in-text citation with their classmates and the year, right, separated by semicolons. And then that period comes after the citation. The reason we put the period after the in-text citation is because we want to treat the in-text citation as part of the sentence, right? So this information goes with the sentence, so the sentence doesn't end until after the citation. Okay, classmates suggested similar and diverse responses in how to overcome stated challenges. Prayer, meditation, and having faith in God presented as a common thread for several classmates. Both internal and external guidance was stated as a means to cope with challenges. Sufficient planning and creating calendars are tools that many will implement. Again, there's a little space missing here that should be there, but that's okay. You would want to correct that, but it's too late for me to tell them. However, others express the importance of depending on loved ones and colleagues to assist in overcoming challenges. Okay, there we go. Final citation. Now, they didn't quite make it to a synthesis so far. It's high-level analysis and it's groundwork for a synthesis. But then they would have to have stepped back and said, well, what is all this really adding up to? So at the end here, I added a synthesized conclusion in bold and italics. So this is how I would have ended it to work on, to turn this all this good analysis into a synthesis. So what cannot be denied is that, even during a deadly pandemic, our lives are centered around time management. The challenges we face in whatever form invariably involve our accountability to the minutes and hours of the work and school day. This means that, in no small measure, our standards of resilience and empathy are circumscribed by the demands of the clock. It's a sobering reminder of where we are as a society. Okay, so that's just me stepping back and saying, hey, this is all about clock time and trying to stay accountable to the clock in whatever form they're talking about it, and we need to say something important about that because you're in the middle of a deadly pandemic. People are losing loved ones and friends, and yet we are still panicked about the clock, right? That means the clock maybe is exercising undue influence over our lives, such as kind of the condition. The second thing you can look for areas of agreement and disagreement, or you can look for concessions and conditions that are unspoken. So when I step back from that, I was thinking about an unspoken condition, that we are maybe a little too beholden to the clock, and that's what maybe all this adds up to. Okay, so let's look at the next one. So doctoral students face many challenges as they write their dissertations. The COVID-19 virus's pandemic created challenges with additional work responsibilities. And then we have our in-text citation. That's good, with the period at the end there, separated by semicolons. Students have battled the illness themselves, while others have had ill family members or relatives who have died from COVID. Time management and finding a balance between family, work responsibilities, and completing assignments on time also continue to pose a challenge to the students. So here we're still in the realm of analysis. We're just saying what all we're finding in our classmates' work. Doctoral students face many challenges, but they face those challenges with a plan to persevere. Like, okay, well, maybe they mention perseverance explicitly. I don't know that yet, but this could be groundwork for a synthesis, so I'm going to highlight it. So we go down to the next one. The students' plans to face the many challenges incorporate a balance of time management and priorities. Whether support systems created with family members or within the cohort, extra support gives the doctoral students the needed encouragement to continue with the program. Another essential resource the students utilize when facing challenges is prayer and trust in God. They strengthen their faith through reading their Bibles, remembering encouraging scripture, and meditation. Again, in-text citations all over the place. That's good. Despite any challenge doctoral students face, they overcome the challenge in various ways and persevere with a determination to finish and graduate. So to me, that was laying the groundwork. Another brick. Well, okay, I'm changing metaphors. Another brick in the wall of a synthesis. But here again, it's more groundwork for a synthesis. But the synthesis, they didn't quite get there, and so I added one in bold and italics here at the end. So the strong conceptualization of doctoral studies as a test or challenge, because I noticed that was something they kept mentioning all throughout here, tests and challenges and overcoming tests and challenges. Okay. So the strong conceptualization of doctoral studies as a test or challenge speaks to an often unspoken motive for pursuing this level of study. That is, many of us come to doctoral work in pursuit of a moral, spiritual, or intellectual equivalent of the quest. Like famous characters of questing fiction, we embark on this journey to grow, to be challenged, to discover mentors and new internal resources, and to be changed. In this sense, we are engaged with our archenemy, time, in a battle for spiritual rebirth or renewal. Okay, so that would be a synthesized thought at the end of all this. What does all of this really add up to? And where is the focus of all of this detail? Well, the focus of all this detail was on the challenges. Okay, well, what can we make of that? Okay, so we step back, big picture, that's what we can make of it. I did not change this one at all because I did a decent job, so I'm just going to read this one through to you. Completing a doctoral program can be challenging. However, each student experiences these challenges differently, and challenges that are not directly related to the coursework may cause more concern than the coursework itself. For example, concerns related to COVID-19 are a primary focus in the post threads by DL1 students. And they did their good job on the in-text citations. The exact challenges experienced with COVID-19 vary among the respondents. A number of school administrators stated that COVID-19 caused concerns with safety and staffing. Others indicated that COVID-19 was challenging because of the need to shift their roles and responsibilities. Good job again on the in-text citations. Reynolds, and so here we have a citation done differently with somebody's name, and then we have the year in parentheses right after them. Reynolds discussed his personal battle with a recent diagnosis with COVID-19. Challenges with keeping up with the demands of parenting and family were also noted. Okay. Floyd, again we have this within the sentence citation, Floyd and Bussell both indicated that significant life changes with home sales and moves caused challenges for them. In contrast, only two respondents indicated challenges with the coursework was the primary concern. Here, I think they're laying the groundwork now. So this is all analysis. They're talking about what people said. Focusing on time management and priorities were common strategies identified by respondents in battling the stress caused by being a doctoral student. Okay, so they're finding a link between things. So that's the step one, maybe. Likewise, relying on the support of others and asking for help were other examples of stress management. And this is actually them. I just went ahead and bolded and italicized it because I thought they did an okay job of synthesizing here. In conclusion, while the stress of completing a doctoral program is unlikely to go away, the circumstances that are cited as most challenging for students are often unrelated to the doctoral coursework itself. So that's good. That's them stepping back and taking a look at what's being said. Like, what's the common thread here? Instead, balancing external forces, work and family obligations may be underlying causes of the challenges experienced by doctoral students. So good. They did a good job of stepping back and taking a look at what the big picture is. And this is the last one. A majority of the students in the DL-DL1 cohort face challenges related to their personal lives, work, earning a doctoral degree, and this current course. Time management, scheduling time to write, and seeking work-life balance are common challenges for a majority of the DL1 students. These challenges mainly stem from an awareness that students will need to devote additional time and attention to this course. On the contrary, only a few students expressed that they face challenges that are not necessarily related to the course or earning a doctoral degree. These students shared struggles with personal health, life changes, work decisions, COVID-19, and grieving as existing challenges. They got their in-text citations. Although not course-related, several students acknowledge that these challenges will affect the individual's ability to focus on and complete course assignments. Okay. And here's where they lay the groundwork for a synthesis. Every student in the course intends to overcome the obstacles they're facing. While some of the strategies they discussed are more task-oriented, others are more intrinsic in nature. So looking at commonalities and then they're categorizing them, so that's good. For example, a large number of students facing time management and balancing challenges expressed that they would create action plans, designate times to work on a schedule, and make a conscious effort to avoid procrastination. While on the other hand, several students stated they intended to combat challenges within themselves through hard work, prayer, and faith in God, mustering determination to meet challenges when they arise, reminding themselves to pause for a breath in moments that are overwhelming, visualizing the goal, and surrounding themselves with encouragement and support. Okay, back into analysis, that's okay. And they've got their in-text citations there. Overall, individuals in this cohort may face challenges related to personal life, work, earning a doctoral degree in the current course, but each individual has chosen the most effective strategies for themselves to persevere through challenges. Okay, so that's another bit of groundwork for a synthesis. They don't quite get there, though, so I had to add one in for them. So the takeaway here is that there appears to be no one-size-fits-all approach to the challenges of doctoral study. That, in fact, part of growth as a scholar is discovering what resources one already possesses and what resources one most needs to develop. Okay, so that's me just stepping back a step and saying, well, what's all this add up to? Okay, so hopefully that makes better sense now. So finally, there is a YouTube video here. I'm just going to point out, I'm not going to play it for you here in the lecture, but this video is here. It's great because you'll see here that the woman who put the video together uses what looks to me like pretty solid APA formatting, and tells you how to do synthesis on research articles, which will be super important to you as you're putting together your 50 articles. Okay, so I highly, highly recommend watching this video. I believe it's 10 minutes long. But that's all I have for you. I'm going to look over at the screen so I can turn everything off.